What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be covering the state of Poison Spark without the 1000 Divine Original Sin Amethyst Ring. Long story short here, we have concluded after a bunch of testing that the Original Sin Ring is a luxury item not at all necessary for making a well-rounded Poison Spark character. We have been able to keep all of the damage from my min-max, no compromise Original Sin build, as well as all of the survivability layers without this extreme cost to the ring. Obviously, there are going to be some compromises we make with this ring, which I will go over in this video. But essentially, this is a short build update that pulls most of the cost away from this build, and we keep all of its power. Okay, so I'm just going to cover the few changes we're making from the original build. And quick disclaimer here, I should say this is not a standalone build guide because there's 90% overlap between this variant as well as the original Sin variant of the build, which has its own like 30-40 minute video that I put out a few days ago. And that video should be watched after you finish this if you do plan on playing this build, because it has crafting guides for all of the gear. They have timestamps, so it's very easy to find out where it is. And I also take the time to explain the synergies between our gearing, our passive tree, our jewels, including the timeless jewel, and the tattoos we use. And all of that is just going to be covered in the original video. I'm not going to repeat anything. We're going to keep this nice and short here. Okay, so what are the changes? First off, we are making use of the unique boots Inextricable Fate because they have the line, all damage poisons against enemies with at least 3 grasping vines. These boots do apply grasping vines, but they apply them extremely slowly, so we can kind of disregard that aspect to it. These boots just let our damage poison. We're combining these boots with an amulet anoint that just came out of this league called Vine Spike Cordial, which has the text, inflict grasping vines on hit if the enemy has less than 8 of them, but only during the effect of our life flask. And to make this tech work very well, we're going to be using our Ascendancy Master Surgeon, which lets our life flask persist even while at full HP. Now, all of this sounds a little jank since poison is delayed damage, and now we're delaying it even further with the requisite 3 hits of Grasping Vines before the poison damage could even start. However, in reality, Spark has really good coverage, and this build has crazy projectile speed, which means all of these Grasping Vines are being inflicted multiple screens away on monsters that aren't even activated or moving, and like we can't even see them. Honestly, a lot of these monsters will die to poison damage before they even get to your screen. As for ramping up those 3 Grasping Vines, the build has enough cast speed where when you enter the map, it's going to take half a second of Spark hits to start the poison. And we're using Soul Ascension gloves, which ramp the cast speed all the way up to a point where once the build is going, we only need 1/4 of a second to start inflicting poison damage. So the obvious conclusion here is that Spark's innate range coupled with very fast projectile speed and cast speed is completely mitigating the clunky aspect of this synergy. So all this sounds well and good, what's the catch? There are some downsides to this setup, the most obvious one being that the life flask has to be up at all times for us to even inflict the Grasping Vines to allow us to poison enemies. Having a permanent life flask has been a staple to Pathfinder builds in the past, so for some people, having to click the life flask persistently is going to feel pretty normal. It does eventually become second nature once you get used to doing it. But obviously, this is going to feel worse to Original Sin, where literally the only button you have to press is your Spark button. There are some other downsides. We are doing lightning damage without the Original Sin, which means we will die to Ellie Reflect. It also means that we don't pierce proximity shields. So Spark, sometimes it'll be activated while it's inside the proximity shield to kill an enemy, but you need a lot of sparks just to like RNG that. Whereas with Original Sin, the chaos damage completely ignores the proximity shield and you poison immediately. The same can be said for ignoring energy shield, but that's only on the hit portion, and the hit portion of this lightning damage version of Poison Spark is so low that you will basically be ignoring 99% of enemies' energy shield. It's just the proximity shield monsters that do become a slight nuisance. This setup does use dual curses, which is a positive and a negative. The positive side is that Original Sin sort of limits enemies to having 0 resistance, where we can actually push them into the negatives. And Despair, when coupled with Hex Bloom, is honestly pretty comfortable because as you kill monsters, the curse proliferates into more monsters, and if the map is dense enough, you may not even have to cast it more than once or twice throughout the whole map. Also, we do have quite a bit of damage, so do you even need to be Hex Bloom despairing on basic monsters? Maybe not. Original Sin has the downside where all of this ignoring resistances is done in a little bubble around you that's about 2/3 the size of your screen. So by not using Original Sin and by using this Hex Bloom curse, our curses can spread off screen and we can be doing massive damage to stuff far away from us. Whereas Original Sin, you sort of have to be standing next to a monster to do really high damage. This also can be a plus when you're fighting uber bosses on Poison Spark using this setup, because for example, if you're doing Uber Maven, you just have to cursor with Despair and then you can run to the other side of the screen. You don't have to always be standing like on top of her to do your damage. So, you know, there's pros and cons of both setups. I would say obviously this is slightly more active in terms of your button play style, but there aren't that many buttons and I think it's completely manageable. At the end of the day, the biggest selling point to this POB would be that this build is so much cheaper without making any compromises to our power. I'm happy with this setup enough to say, again, Original Sin, luxury item for the lazy one-handed gameplay, and you don't actually get power from it. Hope this video makes Poison Spark more accessible, and yeah, make sure you check out the main build guide for all the crafting info and for all the detailed build explanations. See you in the next one. Peace.